it seemed like there was resistance to that movie.
Oh yeah, no, there was
There was like Hollywood resistance to that movie. Like people didn't like that you were making it. It seemed like
there was a lot of opposition to it. It was like, you're making this film, and the idea was that we're all responsible for this. That his sacrifice was for all mankind.
Mel Gibson just told Joe Rogan what really happened behind the Passion of the Christ. Every studio in Hollywood refused to fund it, so he paid $30 million himself. The film made over $600 million. But the money is not the story. The actor playing Jesus was struck by lightning during the crucifixion scene. The whips cut his real skin.
Well, I was struck by lightning on the last shot of the movie. Wow. It's well known. I've talked about it before.
An atheist actor became a believer, and nobody can explain any of it. This is what Hollywood has been hiding for 20 years. Gibson told Rogan in this podcast, it was not just about a movie, it was about something much bigger. About good and evil. About an industry that picks and chooses which religions are allowed to be respected and which ones are fair game for attack. About what happens when you bet everything you have on a story that the entire system wants silenced. And about what happened on that film set that nobody, not Gibson, not the crew, not science, can explain to this day. When Gibson first came up with the idea for the Passion of the Christ, he was not thinking about box office numbers or awards or controversy. He wanted to make something that would grab people by the throat and force them to understand what sacrifice actually means.
You're making this film, and the idea was that we're all responsible for this, that his sacrifice was for all mankind.
Not a polished, comfortable Hollywood version of the story. The raw, brutal, unfiltered truth of what happened in the last 12 hours of the life of Jesus Christ. He spent years studying the four Gospels. He went through every verse about the final hours. But he did not stop there. He dug into ancient texts and theological sources that most filmmakers would never touch. He was not just trying to show the events. He was trying to show the weight behind them. Spiritual warfare, the human cost, the divine purpose hidden inside every moment of suffering. And he made a decision that everyone told him was insane. He would not shoot the film in English. He would use Aramaic, Latin, and Hebrew, the actual languages that would have been spoken in Jerusalem 2,000 years ago. He wanted every word to feel real. He wanted audiences to stop watching a movie and start witnessing something. That decision alone should tell you everything about who Mel Gibson is as a filmmaker. He was not trying to make something comfortable. He was trying to make something true. And the truth, as he was about to find out, is the one thing Hollywood cannot tolerate. The industry that tried to stop him. When Gibson started looking for funding, he expected resistance. He did not expect total silence. And he was an Oscar-winning director. He had made Braveheart. He had been one of the biggest movie stars on the planet for 2 decades. Studios should have been fighting over the chance to work with him. Instead, every phone call went unanswered. Every meeting was canceled. Colleagues who had worked beside him for years started keeping their distance. The message was clear. This story was not welcome. And the man trying to tell it was no longer welcome either. Gibson told Rogan something that most people in the industry will never say publicly. He said there is a clear double standard in Hollywood when it comes to religion. Films about other spiritual traditions get respectful treatment, careful handling, thoughtful storytelling. But when someone wants to tell a Christian story, the response is completely different. Dismissal, mockery. Even Rupert Murdoch, one of the most powerful media figures in the world, considered distributing the film. Then someone advised him that it would destroy his business within 5 years. Rupert Murdoch backed away from a movie because someone told him a film about Jesus would ruin him. Think about what that tells you. The man who owns half the media on the planet was told that distributing a film about Christ would be career suicide. If he was afraid, imagine what a smaller filmmaker was facing. But Gibson did not walk away. He never does. When the entire system said no, he reached into his own pocket and pulled out $30 million, his own money, every cent of it. He assembled a team of people who believed in the same vision and were not afraid of what the industry might do to them. And what happened next shocked everyone, including Gibson himself. The Passion of the Christ earned over $600 million on a $30 million budget. Churches organized group viewings. Families who had never been to an R-rated film bought tickets. People sat in silence for 2 hours and left in tears. The millions of viewers that Hollywood had insisted did not exist showed up in record numbers. Gibson had walked around the entire Hollywood system. He had made a handshake deal with a tiny distribution company that had never handled anything this big, and he had proven that the most powerful industry in the world was wrong about what audiences wanted. That is when things got interesting, because in Hollywood, being right is sometimes worse than being wrong. Being right means you expose the system, and the system does not forgive that. What happened on that set? Now we get to the part of the conversation that made Joe Rogan go quiet. Because what Gibson described next was not about Hollywood politics or box office numbers. It was about things that happened during filming that no one on that crew has ever been able to explain. Jim Caviezel was cast as Jesus. He was not a superstar. Gibson chose him specifically because he wanted audiences to see the character, not a famous face. Caviezel understood what the role would cost him. He accepted it, knowing it might end his career. He accepted it anyway. The physical suffering he went through during filming was real, not movie real, actually real. The cross Caviezel carried weighed over 150 pounds. During one take, it shifted and dislocated his shoulder completely. The pain on his face in that moment was not acting. It was a real injury happening in real time on camera. Gibson kept the footage because no special effect could have matched it.
But prior to that, it was shoulder dislocation. And I mean, it happened in the weirdest areas of the movie.
During the scourging scene, the prop whips actually struck his body. Twice. Once hard enough to knock the wind out of his lungs. His hands were left bleeding and raw. The marks on his skin were real. And then the lightning started. The assistant director, a young Italian man named John Michelini, was struck by lightning during filming. Not once, twice, on 2 separate occasions. He survived both times. But after the second strike, the crew found him sitting in a tiny car with his knees pressed up against his chest, waiting for the third one. He told Gibson he needed to change his life. Then it hit Caviezel. The actor playing Jesus Christ was struck by lightning while filming the crucifixion scene. He walked away without serious injury. In the Bible, lightning appears at moments of divine power. It marks turning points. It signals the presence of something beyond human control. The crew on that set could not explain what was happening around them. The line between what was natural and what was supernatural felt dangerously thin. But the lightning was not the only unexplainable thing. The actor who played Judas was an Italian man named Luca Lionello. He walked onto that set as an atheist. He had no religious belief. He took the role because it was a good part in a film by a famous director. Nothing more. By the time filming ended, he was a believer. Months of inhabiting the role of Judas, exploring betrayal and guilt and the possibility of forgiveness, had changed something inside him that he could not undo. The actress who played Mary was secretly pregnant during filming. She carried new life inside her body while acting out the death and burial of Christ. Birth and death happening inside the same person at the same time. Nobody on set knew until later. And then there were the healings. Gibson told Rogan that a young girl with severe epilepsy visited the set. After her visit, she went an entire month without a single seizure. others reportedly experienced things that nobody could explain through medicine or science. Whether you believe these events were divine, coincidental, or psychological, the people who were there all walked away saying the same thing. They had participated in something far bigger than making a movie. Something was present on that set that did not belong to the world of cameras and scripts.
So when we were on the cross together, he was completely playing the scene, and that was my prayer.
Then the conversation went somewhere deeper. Gibson started talking about what he has been working on for the last 7 years. A sequel to The Passion, but not just a sequel, something far more ambitious. Gibson and screenwriter Randall Wallace have spent 6 to 7 years writing a film about the resurrection. But it is not a simple, straightforward story of a man rising from the dead. Gibson described it as a cosmic journey, a story that spans from the fall of the angels to the death of the last apostle. A narrative that travels through heaven, through earth, and through hell. Gibson told Rogan that to tell this story honestly, you have to leave Earth entirely. You have to go to places that films do not normally go. He specifically said the story requires going to hell, not as a metaphor, as a literal part of the journey.
You need to go to hell. You need to go to Sheol.
He described one version of the script as something like an acid trip, a cosmic experience that goes beyond traditional storytelling, where fallen angels, different levels of reality, and the battle between good and evil all come together in a single narrative. This is not a safe Hollywood sequel. This is a filmmaker who nearly destroyed his career once for telling a story nobody wanted told, preparing to do it again, bigger, bolder, more dangerous. And then Gibson asked Rogan a question that silenced the room. Every single one of the apostles died, rather than deny what they claimed to have witnessed. They were tortured. They were executed. They were given every chance to take it back and save their own lives. Not one of them did. Gibson looked at Rogan and asked directly, who dies for something they know is a lie? Rogan did not have an answer, because there is no comfortable answer. Either the apostles were telling the truth about what they saw after the crucifixion, or they voluntarily suffered horrific deaths to protect a story they knew was fiction. One of those options requires faith. The other requires an explanation that nobody has ever been able to provide. That question is the foundation of everything Gibson is building with this next film. Not preaching, not lecturing. Just one simple, devastating question that he wants every single person in the audience to sit with. Why Gibson has to change his life for this film. Near the end of the conversation, Gibson said something that most people missed. He said he cannot make this film as the person he is right now. He has to change. He has to prepare himself spiritually before he can even begin production. Think about what that means. This is a man who has made some of the biggest films in cinema history. He has directed wars, chases, torture scenes, and epic battles. None of those required him to change who he is as a person before starting work. But this one does. Because this one is not just a film to him. It is the most important story he will ever tell. And he believes that telling it wrong would be worse than not telling it at all. Gibson openly admits he is not a perfect example of faith. He has made mistakes. He has flaws. He has been through public humiliation that most people could not survive. But he also believes that the story of the resurrection is the single most important event in human history, and he believes he is the person who is supposed to put it on screen. The Shroud of Turin connection. During the podcast, Gibson also brought up the Shroud of Turin.
Just recently, they verified the Shroud of Turin. Have you seen that?
This is the ancient cloth that many believe wrapped the body of Jesus after his death. It has been one of the most debated artifacts in history. Gibson pointed out something that most people do not realize. The image on the shroud was not painted. It was not drawn. It was not created using any technology that existed 2,000 years ago. or any technology that exists today. Scientists have studied it for decades. They have used every method available, and they still cannot explain how the image was made. The hairstyle on the figure matches first-century Hebrew men. The wounds match the specific injuries described in the crucifixion accounts. The pollen found in the cloth came from the exact region where these events took place, and recent studies have dated the cloth to roughly 2,000 years ago, consistent with the time of Christ. Gibson said the image could only have been made by an intense burst of light, something almost atomic in nature. Something that left a photographic imprint on a piece of cloth in a way that modern science cannot replicate. For Gibson, this is not just a relic, it is physical evidence, and it is part of the story he wants to tell in his next film. Good and evil are real. The conversation kept coming back to one central theme. Throughout the entire podcast, whether they were talking about Hollywood politics, supernatural events on set, the resurrection, or the Shroud of Turin, Gibson kept returning to the same point. Good and evil are real. They are not concepts. They are not metaphors. They are forces that are actively fighting for the souls of human beings, and that fight is happening right now. In every institution, in every industry, in every person. Gibson told Rogan that this battle between good and evil is the story he wants to tell in his next film, not as an abstract idea, as something real and present and dangerous. He believes that institutions that claim to represent the divine are necessarily affected by this war. And sometimes the wrong side wins. Sometimes good gives up ground. Sometimes deception creeps in so slowly that nobody notices until it is too late. He connected this to Hollywood. He connected it to the resistance against his film. He connected it to the way certain stories are promoted while others are buried. And he connected it to the way modern society treats faith as something embarrassing rather than something essential. For Gibson, making The Passion of the Christ was not just filmmaking. It was an act of war in a battle most people do not even realize is happening, and the sequel, the resurrection story, is the next battle, the film nobody could stop. Here is what most people missed about the conversation between Mel Gibson and Joe Rogan. It was not about controversy. It was not about Hollywood gossip. It was not about promotion or marketing or entertainment. It was about a man who stood alone against the most powerful storytelling industry on earth and told a story that the entire system said should never be made. He paid for it with his own money, paid for it with his reputation. He paid for it with years of attacks and ridicule and exile. And the story won $600 million, millions of lives changed, the highest grossing R-rated film in American history, made outside the system by a man the system had rejected. Lightning struck the actor playing Jesus during the crucifixion scene. An atheist actor became a believer. The whips drew real blood, and 20 years later, the man who made it all happen is preparing to do it again. Gibson asked Rogan one question that still echoes. Who dies for something they know is a lie? Nobody does, and maybe that is the point. Maybe the resistance Gibson faced, the supernatural events on set, the film's impossible success against every odd, maybe all of it is part of the same story. Story about what happens when someone bets everything on a truth that the world does not want to hear. The Passion of the Christ was not just a movie. It was proof that some stories are bigger than the people who try to stop them, and the resurrection is next. Gibson is not finished. The resurrection film is coming, and if what happened on the set of the first film is any indication, the world should be paying very close attention to what happens during the making of the second one. Because whatever you believe about faith, about God, about good and evil, one thing is clear from this conversation. Something happened during the making of The Passion of the Christ that nobody can explain. Something happened in those theaters in 2004 that nobody predicted. And something is about to happen when Gibson finally tells the second half of this story, The first half shook the world. The second half might change it. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Do you believe the supernatural events on set were real? Are you waiting for the resurrection film? Hit that like button if this conversation changed how you think about what Hollywood does not want you to see. And subscribe, because when that film finally arrives, you are going to want to know everything, and we will be here to tell you.